Let's talk about fatherlessness again. Hello everyone and welcome back to Heiser Says. And I'd like to continue from where we finished off yesterday, talking about fatherlessness and the impacts that that being fatherlessness or not from a two-parent household have on children. And this is from the website, which is Dads for Kids. And this is statistics of fatherlessness in America and just research and examples. It's actually from an archive that I've discovered. And I think it's good to just read through it and to look at what their claims are and what research has found, and to compare and contrast to what is being put out there now, particularly with, one could argue, a media and third-wave feminist attack on masculinity in all forms, from shaving to books to education, everywhere really. And some of these things are very disturbing, and if you haven't watched part one that I did yesterday, please, I suggest you have a look at it, and we'll jump right back in. So, porn in trouble. In 1988, Department of Health and Human Services study found that at every income level, except the very highest, over $50,000 a year, that's $93, children living with never married mothers were more likely than their counterparts in two-parent families to have been expelled or suspended from school, to display emotional problems, and to engage in antisocial behavior. We also have to realize what they probably considered emotional problems in 1993 may be encouraged and normal these days. Seriously, that's something to consider. Fatherlessness, aggression. In a longitudinal study of 1,197 fourth grade students, researchers observed greater levels of aggression in boys from mother-only households than from boys in mother-father households. One could almost say that's toxic femininity causing a greater aggression in boys from mother-only households. Wow, that goes against the narrative that we're being portrayed. Act now, pay later. Children from mother-only families have less of an ability to delay gratification. That is a huge, very important thing to teach your children if you want them to succeed in their life, to learn how to delay their gratification. And poorer impulse control, that is control over anger and sexual gratification. These children also have a weaker sense of consciousness or sense of right and wrong. 80% of adolescents in psychiatric hospitals come from broken homes. Crazy victims. 80%. Dud to dead. The economic consequence of a father's absence are often accompanied by psychological consequences, which include higher than average levels of youth suicide, low intellect and educational performance, and higher than average rates of mental illness, violence, and drug use. Is this why we have all this generation of soy boys, beta cucks, and just weak people, weak millennials that expect the state to care for them? Is that because so many of them were brought up in these type of situations? Let me know what you think. Expelled nationally, 15.3% of children living with a never married mother, and 10.7% of children living with a divorced mother have been expelled or suspended from school, compared to only 4.4% of children living with both their biological parents. Wow. Excuse me, I need a coffee. This is a long one. Violent rejection. Kids who exhibited violent behavior at school were 11 times as likely not to have lived with their father and 6 times as likely to have parents who were not married. Boys from families with absent fathers are at a high risk of violent behavior than boys with intact families. I think a lot of this has to do with just stability. Children want stability. They want boundaries and stability. And even notice how they're referring to unmarried mothers or unmarried, that's a sign of stability when you're married, when you have, nice, boring suburban life. Children without fathers or with stepfathers are less likely to have friends who think it's important to behave properly in school. They also exhibit more problems with behavior and in achieving goals. That was from 94. Likeliest to succeed. Children who live with both biological parents at age 14 are significantly more likely to graduate from high school than those kids who live with a single parent or a parent and step-parent or neither parent. worse to bad. Children in single-parent families tend to score lower on standardized tests and to receive lower grades in school. Children in single-parent families are nearly twice as likely to drop out of school as children from two-parent families. And that's from Dropping Out, Congressional Research Service Report, 1988. Children from disrupted families are 20% more likely, 20% more unlikely to attend college than kids from intact two-parent families. Okay, Family Law Quarterly, 86. Back then, that was probably a good thing. Now it's probably better not to go to college with the indoctrination and debt you get, particularly in America. Kids living in single-parent homes or in step family reported lower educational expectations on the part of their parents, less paternal monitoring of schoolwork, and less overall social supervision than children from intact families. Well, that really isn't that surprising. It's tough raising kids, particularly if you're the sole breadwinner and you have to also do all of these other things. I can just imagine how exhausted people will be. We're exhausted in our family as well, with both of us. And even a grandparent living with us too, it still is exhausting. Double risk. Fatherless kids, children living in homes without a stepfather or without contact with their biological father, are twice as likely to drop out of school. Nationally, 29.7% of children living with a never married mother and 21.5% of children living with a divorced mother have repeated at least one grade in school, compared to 11.6% of children living with both biological parents. And this is from 91, so I doubt they even would make them repeat these days. They probably have the No Child Left Behind, so they just slide them on through the system and they don't care about them. Underpaid high achievers. Children from low-income two-parent families outperform students from high-income single-parent families. Almost twice as many high achievers come from two-parent homes as one-parent homes. There you go. There you go. Sometimes the money doesn't make a difference. Stability and hard work does. That's interesting. Dadless and dumb. At least 1/3 of children experiencing a parental separation demonstrate a significant decline in academic performance, persisting at least 3 years. That's not surprising. It's a very stressful time for the children. And often they'll blame themselves, and the people say they're resilient, but it does affect kids, and it can carries on into their life. I was quite fortunate. I grew up with a stable family life, stable parents. I was an only child, so I was spoiled like anything, but that caused a whole series of other issues, and usually what my wife has to put up with these days. Son of Solo, and I don't think they're referring to Han. According to a recent study, a bit dated, of youth non-custodial fathers who are behind on child support payments, less than half of these men were living with their own father at age 14. Okay, so it's probably continuity of the issues. Slip sliding. Amongst black kids between the ages of 6 to 9 years old, black children in mother-only households scored significantly lower on tests of intellectual ability than black children living with two parents. Could often just be one of the parents having time to read to their kid at night, or to spend time with them, or to look at their drawings. That can make a big impact. Dadless dropouts. After taking into account race, socioeconomic status, sex, age, and ability, high school students from single-parent households were 1.7 times more likely to drop out than where their corresponding counterparts lived with their biological parents. Take 2. Families in which both child's biological or adoptive parents are present in the household show significantly higher levels of paternal involvement in the children's school activities than do mother-only families or step-families. Well, that's not surprising. I think it's got to do with time. Con Garden. 43% of prison inmates grew up in single-parent households. Wow. That is insane. 39% with their mother, 4% with their fathers. I have to find out if this still exists, but I would be shocked if it isn't. Look at that, nearly 40% of them with their mothers and 4% with their fathers. And an additional 14% lived in households without either biological parent. So this just shows you how important the stability is of parenting, and how big a problem fatherlessness has. Look at that difference. How can anyone be arguing that masculinity is toxic when if you take the masculinity out of a child's upbringing, they're nearly 10 times as likely to end up in prison than if you remove the femininity? How can anyone not see that? Why? This type of stuff isn't, I don't find this shocking. I find it sad and disturbing, but none of this surprises me. It just makes, a lot of it makes quite sense. But it's probably because I'm reading this as someone who came from an environment with two parents, where you've got all these social justice warriors who are probably the ones suffering from maybe mental illness and believing in crazy fantasies and things, like the woman who saw KKK on a bloody children's toy. You know, maybe she came from one of these families where the high rate of mental illness. Could that be why? And then they wouldn't believe this. Cognitively, they'll suffer cognitive dissonance and not believe any of it. Wow. Another 14% spend at least part of their childhood in a foster home, agency, or other juvenile institution. That's from the US Bureau of Statistics. So state-by-state inmates. So that's from 91. We'll have to look that up and compare it to now. But I would be shocked if it wasn't real, if it wasn't still happening. Although crime's probably gone down. Criminal mums, criminal kids. The children of single teenage mothers are more at risk for later criminal behavior. In the case of a teenage mother, the absence of a father also increases the risk of harshness from the mother. Now, that surprises a lot of people. If you've watched anything, Stefan Molyneux's videos about the topic, just the amount of abuse that comes from mothers towards their children is crazy. It's crazy, and it's still evident. You see it all the time. There was, just recently, I read an article here in where someone was convicted, like a boyfriend of a mother was backing up the seat and ended up killing a toddler behind him in the car, in the wheel gap. Crushed him to death because he was being noisy. Mother didn't intervene. She was sitting there. You know? It's disgusting. People are all saying, oh, what can we do? What can we do? Well, you know, you've got to learn this. People have to learn this and realize the implications of the decisions they're making. Because, you know, it's all one thing to be critical of you know, these households, but you have to understand people haven't been taught anything anymore. We're in a you know, a secular society where everyone's fed this feminist ideology, where masculinity is attacked at every avenue, and you know, what are they basing their decisions on? A bunch of garbage with no historical precedent. And most people aren't smart enough to dig and find it themselves. They just don't have the energy. They're struggling to live. So in some ways, it's really sad. So rearing rapists. Oh, here we go. 72% of adolescent murderers grew up without fathers. 60% of America's rapists grew up the same way. Now that, right there, is a sign of toxic femininity. Right there. 60% of rapists are fatherlessness. Okay? That is nuts. That is just insane. Why isn't this being discussed? Why isn't the damage that fatherlessness is doing to our society, why is it not being discussed? Why is masculinity being attacked again and again and again? Let me know in the comments. Please give me an explanation of why. Is it just third wave feminists have just gone to the point where it's stupid? Is it because we've got the internet now? Every idiot with a Tumblr blog, or like me with a YouTube channel, can put their opinions out. But most people are just damaged so much they believe in all this crazy rubbish. Crime and poverty. The proportion of single-parent households in the community predicts its rate of violent crime and criminals. And the community's poverty level does not. What the? Wait a minute. The proportion of single-parent households in a community predicts its rate of violent crime and break-and-enters but the community's poverty level does not. Wow, that goes against the narrative. That goes against the narrative. I'm going to have to go to the old QUT library and put some orders in to get some of these journals. Because that is insane. There you go. Right there. And the thing is, you have to understand that a lot of these families are subsidized by the state. Single parent households are subsidized by the state. They exist because the state can fund them. They existed in the past, sure, but it was frowned upon, or it was a tragedy if something happened to your partner. Would we have? I challenge you. I'm asking a question. Do you think we'd have the same amount of single parent households if we had the welfare system the same as we did, or if we changed it? If we had no fault divorce, would we still have it? So marriage matters. Only 13% of juvenile delinquents come from families in which the biological mother and father are married to each other. By contrast, 33% have parents who are either divorced or separated, and 44% have parents who were never married. Comes back to stability. No good time. Compared to boys from intact two-parent families, teenage boys from disrupted families are not only more likely to be incarcerated for delinquent offenses, but also to manifest worse conduct while incarcerated. Wow. 70% of juveniles in state reform institutions grew up in single-parent or no-parent situations. Survey of youth in custody, 87. The main thing. The relationship between family structure and crime is so strong that controlling for family configuration erases the relationship between race and crime, and between low income and crime. This conclusion shows up time and again in the literature. Putting Children First, Progressive Policy Institute, 1990. That is insane. That is insane. You've got all these people saying, you've got the low IQ causing criminality. But here, the relationship family structure is so strong that it erases race and low income and crime. That is crazy. That is one definitely to read and to challenge a whole lot of ideas, particularly that the alt-right are pushing out at the moment. So here, teenage fathers are more likely than their childless peers to commit and be convicted of illegal activity. And their offences are more likely to be of a serious nature, and that's teen fathers and the child support system from 92. The hood. The likelihood that a young male will engage in criminal activity doubles if he is raised without a father, and triples if he lives in a neighbourhood with a high concentration of single-parent families. Underclass behaviours in the United States, 93. Why hasn't all of this research shaped public policy? We all know why. Because it doesn't buy votes. Giving people free shit will buy votes. Giving people free welfare will buy votes. Teaching resilience, stability won't buy votes. It's just that simple. Bringing the war back home. The odds that a boy born in America in 1974 will be murdered are higher than the odds that a serviceman in World War II will be killed in combat. And that's from 95. That doesn't seem right. I would put money that is out of date now with just crime going down, but that's shocking. Getting ahead at home and work. Fathers who care for their children's intellectual development and their adolescent social development were more likely to advance in their careers compared to men who weren't involved in such activities. And that's how fathers care for the next generation, Harvard University Press. Well, there you go. That makes a lot of sense too when you've got something to work for. Having children really changes your entire perspective on life. Diaper dads. In 91, about 20% of preschool children were cared for by their fathers, both married and single. In 88, the number was 15%. Where's Papa? Father's role in childcare. So 93. So, okay, that's more dads are involved in the care of their children, and that's probably a good thing. 91, that's 20%. It'd be much higher these days, I'd hope. But then again, also fatherlessness would probably be higher as well. Without leave. 36% of 1,500 CEOs and human resource directors said it was not responsible for a father to take leave after... It was not reasonable for a father to take leave after the birth of a child. That was from 91. So hopefully that's been addressed. And I know here in Australia I could take paid leave. I could take about 2 weeks of leave. And I used it to buy a deep freezer for our meat. But, you know, it's great that I could. So, you know, I appreciate that. That's really important, particularly for the bonding with your children, with newborns. So get a job. The number of men who complained that work conflicts with their family responsibilities rose from 12% in 77 to 72% in 89. Meanwhile, 74% of men preferred a daddy track job to a fast track job. The Fatherhood Project. That's interesting. That is interesting. I know from my personal experience, having children really puts everything in perspective. And you can go career, and work yourself to death for all these things, you know, doing beautiful buildings and projects and exciting stuff. But sometimes just playing with children can be just as rewarding. It's funny, it really is. Long distance dad. So 26% of absent fathers lived in a different state than their children. It's really sad. Cool dad of the week. That was from the Bureau of Statistics from 91, the United States. Cool dad of the week. Among fathers who maintain contact with their children after a divorce, the pattern of their relationship between father and child changes. They begin to behave more like relatives than like parents. Instead of helping with homework, resident dads are more likely to take the kids shopping, to the movies, or out to dinner. Instead of providing steady advice and guidance, divorce fathers become treat dads. And that was Divided Families, Harvard University Press in 91. That does make a lot of sense. Old is not wiser. While 57% of unwed dads with kids know older than 2 visit their children more than once a week, by the time the kid's 7.5, only 23% are in frequent contact with their children. Young unwed fathers, 93. I wonder if that has to do with people denying access for the fathers. 10 years after a breakup of a marriage, more than 2/3 of kids reported not having seen their father for a year. The National Commission on Children, speaking of kids, 91. No such address. More than half the kids who don't live with their father have never been in their father's house. Wow. Divided Families, Harvard University Press, 91. Dadless years. About 40% of kids living in fatherless homes haven't seen their dads in a year or more. Of the rest, only 1 in 5 sleeps even one night a month in their father's home. Only 1 in 6 sees their father once or more per week. Again from Divided Families in 91. According to a 92 Gallup poll, more than 50% of all adults agreed that fathers today spend less time with their kids than their fathers did with them. That was 92. I wonder how that would pan out today, particularly with the presence of these devices. So father unknown. Of kids living in single mother households, 35% never see their fathers, and another 24% see their fathers less than once a month. It's sad. It's from 88. Journal of Marriage and the Family. So missed contact. In a study of 304 young adults, those whose parents divorced after they left home had significantly less contact with their fathers than adult children whose parents remained married. Weekly contact with their children dropped from 78% for still married fathers to 44% for divorced fathers. Later life, parental divorce, and widowhood, the Journal of Marriage and the Family in 94. Commercial breaks. The amount of time a father spends with his child one-on-one averages less than 10 minutes a day. The Rhythm of Everyday Life. Westview Press, 88. I think that would probably be worse today. Guarantee it would be. Particularly here in Australia now, where it probably is worse for not just fathers, for mothers as well. Because you need a 2-parent household to buy a house. 2 parents working. And now with Labor pushing for, childcare subsidized all the way, it's going to happen. Overall, more than 75% of American children are at risk because of parental deprivation. Even in 2-parent households, fewer than 25% of young boys and girls experience an average of at least 1 hour a day of relative individualized contact with their fathers. Source: Henry Byler, The Father Factor, paper based on presentations during meetings with William Galston, Deputy Director, Domestic Policy, Clinton, White House, December 93 and 94. It's before they knew what Clinton was really like, isn't it? Knock knock. Of children aged 5 to 14, 1.6 million return home to houses where there is no adult present. US Bureau of the Census, Who's Minding the Kids? Statistical Brief, April 1994. Who Said Talk's Cheap? Almost 20% of 6th through 12th graders have not had a good conversation lasting at least 10 minutes with one of their parents in more than a month. And that's The Troubled Journey, 93. Justified Guilt in the 1990 LA Times found that 57% of all fathers and 55% of all mothers felt guilt about not spending enough time with their children. The Two-Career Family Dilemma, Los Angeles Times, 1990. I guarantee you that's worse now. Guarantee it that it's worse now. To be a one-parent household or a single-income household, you have to sacrifice a lot of luxury. And, you know, we've made that choice to do it. And it's a bit different for us because we have our own business. So Rachel can work as needed to provide additional support. And, you know, I'm still around the house. But for people where the dad has to leave the house and work in a job, it would be really hard to do. Who are you, mister? In 1965, parents on average spent approximately 30 hours a week with their kids. By 1985, the same amount of time had fallen to 17 hours. That was the Parent Trap Policy Review, Winter 91. I would be terrified to see what that is now. And waiting work. Only 8% of those who finished high school got married before having a child and waited until the age of 20 to have that child were living in poverty by 92. Beyond the Murphy-Brown Debate, Institute for Family Values, December 10, 93. So, and here's some more statistics, and I'll go through those another time. I think we've gone through enough density here in these articles and these reports. So guys, thank you for joining me for these 2 days of looking at fatherlessness. What do you think? Do you think it's gotten worse? Do you think it's gotten better? Do you wonder, like I do, why this isn't being discussed in the media? You know, why masculinity is constantly being attacked when there's evidence here, at least from the past, showing the value of masculinity and why it's essentially been abandoned. Is it the fact that we've got generations brought up with these mental illness problems, that we have this social justice warrior wave and these weak people that just can't handle or are not resilient? People crying at universities because they want safe spaces. You know, I put money that a lot of them are from these type of families and bad environments. Let me know what you think, guys. If you have any current articles or statistics that you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments. I'd definitely like to learn more. There's definitely some papers here I'd like to follow up the contemporary research, but it really just shows how important fathers and stable homes are. And I am worried where our culture's heading, and the fact that, you know, we're talking about toxic masculinity when toxic femininity and children devoid of masculinity has been proven to have tremendously negative impacts. Thank you all for joining me for this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.